Well, good morning. This is the first time I've spoken here in 2026, and it is an absolute pleasure. So thank you for allowing me to share this space with you today. Now, it's interesting to me that many churches, and this one included, assign or have a schedule of particular topics or themes. I was brought up in a church where the minister just talked about whatever they felt like, whenever they felt like it. Like this church has, themes for the month. United Methodist Church has a lectionary on a 3-year cycle. Well, your church's theme for the month, of course, is fire. When I first thought about the term fire in preparation for today, I went to that place of, oh no, snowpack is down. It's going to be a high-risk fire season. And this brought back some bad memories. I've mentioned before that I live in East Portland, and during September 2020, remember we had fires that put Sandy, Estacada, even Troutdale on alert in various threat levels. And the sky at my home had this eerie, overcast, sort of yellow-gray glow. This was also during the COVID pandemic, so the whole thing felt like a dystopian novel. With all the evacuations, we even had some newcomers to Oregon that we knew, and we offered our driveway to them because they were in level 2. They might need a place to go with that camper and trailer and truck and dog, and in case that hit a leave now status. So my first reaction when it came to a title and a theme was fire, and I thought, okay, fire is terrifying and destructive. How do we protect ourselves? And I thought about how we need to avoid being burned metaphorically and spiritually as we're walking through what can sometimes feel like a fiery hell around us. So I had my idea. I sent off my idea to the worship committee about a day before it was due. It was nighttime, so then I went to sleep. And the next morning it was, no. That is not it. Spirit had something else in mind. And sometimes, even between that point and speaking here, things shift a bit again. But trust me, Spirit is always leading the process. So, anyway, I had forgotten to think about all the aspects of fire, like the light and the warmth and the comfort that it brings, the cleansing, the purification. I had not considered the complexity of the symbolism of fire as something that ignites our hearts and minds and that fills us with passion for a cause. I had not considered the healing, even regenerative force that fire can be. And as I did, the positive images of fire and flame came to me. Images such as the fire of St. Bridget, the year of the fire horse. And then there are those ancient biblical stories of God's fire of guidance, as well as God as a refiner. Now, the church I was brought up in spent a lot of time talking about the books of the Old Testament, so I have those images. And then, of course, there's the New Testament stories, the gospel references to the symbolism of Jesus baptizing his followers with spirit and with fire. Lastly, a most fascinating example that I learned about when I was just a kid, paraphytic plants and their relationship to fire. Now, scientifically, fire is a chemical reaction, right? It's a visible effect of the process of combustion. The products left after combustion are completely different from the starting materials. Fire transforms. But we're not going to talk about chemical reactions. We're going to talk about what fire represents, what the symbolism and transformational power of fire can mean in our lives. And fire symbolism occurs across many cultures. In the Hindu faith, the word Agni represents a deity. It's a Sanskrit word for fire, and the 3 forms are flame, lightning, and sun. Fire is a powerful symbol of sanctity in the Jewish tradition. Fire can be used to purify objects, to make them kosher, or that which is forbidden now fit for ritual use. Fire in a fireplace at home represents peace and security. And fire is a metaphor for intense love and desire. Early love is seen as this bright flame, while mature love is seen as long-lasting coals that are warm and comforting. Spiritually, fire often symbolizes powerful, often dualistic forces. It can represent destruction and man's wrath, judgment or tribulation. It can also represent purification, transformation, and a divine presence, and can be used to signify passion, knowledge, and cleansing. Fire can be seen as representing a divine force. So let's start by looking at the fire of St. Bridget. February 1st was St. Bridget's Day. It was originally called Imbolc, which is a traditional Gaelic festival marking the first day of spring. It's a feast day, midway between the solstice and the equinox. A symbol of St. Bridget is the eternal flame. Now some say St. Bridget is the same entity known in the pre-Christian days of Ireland as the goddess Bridget. Some say the saint's merely the Christianization of that goddess, and maybe. Bridget was the patroness of many things, including fire, poetry, learning, healing, and livestock dairy production. Hey, I grew up on a farm. Livestock dairy production is really important. In her honor, a perpetual fire was kept burning in the village of Kildare in Ireland from about the 5th century to the 16th century. The flame represented the fire goddess, as well as the incandescent Celtic saint who embodied the sacred feminine. Her flame was kept burning in ancient times, long before Christianity came to Ireland, and it was during the Reformation under King Henry VIII that Bridget's fire was extinguished. But in 1992, the Brigadine Sisters in Ireland began a process of discerning their mission, and that led them to creating a small center for Christian Celtic spirituality called Solas Bríd. There, once again, they tend to St. Bridget's eternal flame. It is a candle that burns night and day, and I had the good fortune of seeing it when I visited Solas Bríd in 2018. It's a pillar candle. It's much like this Christ candle, and it's surrounded by flowers, and it is never allowed to go out. It burns as an example to us, showing us that we too should tend to our flames. The flame inside of us that needs to be watched and guarded from winds and storms and neglect, so that we don't allow our flame to be blown out or to burn out. Our inner fires are warm and steady. They feed on affirmations, on meditation and prayer, on connection to each other, and connection to the divine. Our next example. You may have read or heard something, or quite a lot, about this being the year of the fire horse. The Lunar New Year just began on February 17th. With traditional Chinese medicine, fire is the element which brings warmth, consciousness, and a capacity for joy. When fire combines with the year of the horse, a symbol of action and independence, it brings a year that rewards clarity, resilience, and intention. And the year of the fire horse, there is a convergence of vitality, intensity, and forward momentum. The energy of this year is disruptive, explosive, and transformative. It is a time for us to ignite the fire of our passions and to seek clarity. It is the time to let our deepest selves shine, and to do so while safeguarding ourselves with self-awareness. It's a year to keep our internal fires balanced. Our passions, our fears, our anger, our frustrations, even our push for something better in this world, these are things that should not be a wildfire that is out of control. They shouldn't be a wild horse galloping with fear toward a cliff, unknowingly edging toward destruction, but still don't fence in that fire. A fire horse year is a time to move forward. It is a year to be visible through the shifts, the opportunities, the endings, and the beginnings. So now this happens every 60 years. So in 1966, what happened? I know some of us remember, some of us have read about it. Well, in 1966, the National Organization for Women was founded. The Vietnam-American War escalated. The television series Star Trek debuted. Indira Gandhi was elected as the first female Prime Minister of India. Chairman Mao Zedong's Cultural Revolution began. The Black Panther Party formed. NASA launched 5 Gemini missions. And that is just a smidgen of what occurred that year, so be ready. Feed the fire within into a steady, warm, life-giving flame, because according to Lunar philosophy, the year of the fire horse has the power to transform, so that what we are now at the beginning of this year can be different from what we are at the end. And next, there are those ancient scriptures and the stories found in them. Stories of fire as a symbol of holiness, protection, and blessing. In Exodus, there's a story of Moses and the angel of God appearing in a burning bush, a bush that was on fire but not consumed. Also in Exodus is the story of God leading the Hebrew people away from Egypt to the promised land by a cloud in the day and a pillar of fire at night, giving them light and direction. In Malachi, God is described as being like a refiner's fire, purifying people, just as gold and silver are purified. In Matthew, Jesus is described as baptizing his followers by fire and by spirit. Well, now I think that phrase, trial by fire, does us a disservice sometimes. God doesn't want us to go through bad things. God doesn't want us to suffer, so that we only call out to God in pain or loss, though God's love is with us to comfort us when pain or loss occur. I suggest that trial by fire is when God's fire comes to us and sparks a passion for holy work, and we choose whether to ignore that passion or to allow it to transform our lives, and in transforming our lives, to transform the world. The point is that Spirit's love for us and in us is more than an emotion. It is an enduring force that is a part of us, and just as fire changes the physical world, divine love can change our hearts and lives, setting them on fire for all things good. We can see Spirit-inspired fire burning in the great causes, such as feeding the hungry, that's done by large organizations preparing meals for people in Gaza and Ukraine. And we have smaller organizations filling that same need, such as church pantries and neighborhood pantries. We see Spirit-inspired fire in the great cause of working for justice, being on fire for justice, but not being consumed by that fire, but instead growing the fire in our hearts and in our work. Perhaps we see the Spirit of fire leading us to a better place, to a better world. Just as the pillar of fire led the Hebrew people out of slavery and oppression, the fire of Spirit can lead us away from the harmful values of greed and materialism and selfishness, and lead us into the rich values of Spirit, generosity, faith, compassion, and love. Spirit's fire can purify us, helping us focus on what is good and right, mercy, justice, walking humbly with God, till the distractions of this world are left behind us, and we walk with the pure love of the Christ within us. And there's another kind of fire. The fire of your faith can light a fire in others. Now, some call this the passing of the torch. I prefer a phrase I heard Gloria Steinem use years ago, when she said, "I am not passing my torch on. I am using it to light the torches of others," which I thought was perfect. Which leads us to the Fillmores. Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, the founders of Unity Church. They're an example of lighting the torches of others. Now, there's an anecdote that I came across about the Fillmores that demonstrates this. The story goes that Charles Fillmore was speaking in Kansas City, and while he was speaking, the fire in the wood stove that heated the church went out. While continuing to speak, Charles stepped down from the platform, picked up the wood which he then cut into kindling, and restarted the fire. Once it was steadily burning, he returned to the platform. And he did all this without missing a word of his remarks. This act of calm, simple humility, just taking a need that presented itself, lighting a fire in a stove that had burned out, lit a fire of faith and service in a boy that was in the congregation that day. So much so, the boy tended to the fire for every remaining service that Charles Fillmore spoke at in that church. And 50 years later, he wrote to Unity to tell them what this simple act by Charles Fillmore had meant to him and how it had changed his life. Relighting a fire, an act of service. An act of service that lit a fire of faith that lasted a lifetime in someone that witnessed it. So what have we talked about so far? Bridget, whose consistent fire of faith burns uninterrupted. The fire horse, whose vital energy progresses forward toward change. Biblical fire, that lights the way in the darkness, that purifies our hearts till we know and feel only love, as well as the baptismal fire of the Christ, representing a total immersion in God's holiness and presence. And the fire lived in others by our lived examples, such as Charles Fillmore's simple, humble act of relighting a wood stove. I've never seen a keynote speaker do that. There's one more example. Fire is a necessary part of a number of different ecosystems. Pyrophytic plants. These are plants that not only survive fires, some have adapted to the point they thrive in the aftermath of a fire. And some even need fire to regenerate. They need fire for the next generation to be birthed. These are plants that have adapted to regrow if they're damaged in a blaze. These are plants with specialized buds, some of them that are protected under their bark, and when burned, these buds emerge to produce new leaves and branches. Others have tubers underground, and new sprouts that come up when the original plant is burned. There are other species that require the chemical signals from smoke and charred matter to break their seeds out of dormancy. And some of these plants will only sprout when these post-fire chemicals are there, and their seeds, they can remain buried for decades until they are awakened by wildfire. Other plants flower prolifically in ash-fertilized soil. And one of the most fascinating adaptations to me is some species require fire for the seeds to sprout. The lodgepole pine, the eucalyptus, their cones or fruits can only open to release their seeds after the heat of a fire has melted the resin that seals them. The new life cannot begin until the fire sweeps through. The fires that sweep across us in these times might burn a hardened exterior, but once that rough exterior is gone, the tender buds of empathy and love can be released to grow. Maybe it's the deep roots and tubers of faith that we grow after a challenge. Maybe we've forgotten to live with compassion, and after a trial, our heart grows again. Maybe we need the smoke of a growing need around us, for the seeds within us to wake up and to burst into bloom. And maybe the fire we fear is not here to destroy, but to set free all of our seeds. The seeds we've kept protected until they're needed and the right set of circumstances arose to release them. And our seeds that are released will grow into more love, tenderness, generosity, laughter, joy, friendship, community, connection, and faith. Our seeds can grow into a far-reaching sense of justice, reaching out to our neighbors and growing our love. Growing our love for all the good and all the beauty that we are and have within us. Growing our love for each other. Growing our love for ourselves. Growing the Christ within us. Some of us spend so much of life afraid of the fire, afraid of any flame beyond a candle. Or maybe a hearth and a fire. Fire and a hearth might be fine, or on a stove, but fire. Because when we hear the world is on fire, it usually doesn't mean a good thing. It should. Because the world can be on fire for justice. We can be refined by the fire of love. But even if we do feel like things are burning down around us, it might just be the fire that causes us to steady. The fire that pushes us forward into becoming new instead of retreating into the old ways of the past. The fire we are fearing just might be the light that shows us the way. It might be the fire that purifies us of our doubts and reminds us that Spirit lives within us. It might be the fire that explodes the seeds for a better future, for us and for the world around us. It might be the fire that explodes those seeds. It might be the fire which grows a greater love within and a greater love without. And as the forest fire clears the old and prepares the land for new growth, it activates seeds that need fire to be released and grow. The old ways are being cleared. It is all part of the process. And we are here because we are meant to be here. We were born for this time. And if you feel like I do, maybe at times you never really fit into the old ways of the culture we live in. Maybe it's because Spirit wants us to be here now, to be part of creating something new, a world where love leads. And so, as you go forth this week, be as constant and steady as the fire of St. Bridget. Move forward with the determination of the fire horse. Light the way like a pillar of fire. Refine your love. Immerse yourself in relationship to the Christ within. Light the torches of others with a passion for a cause, and let loose of your seeds so they can grow the new. Be on fire. And so it is.